If you enjoy our videos and podcasts and would like us to continue putting out regular quality content, head over to patreon.com/aircrewinterview, where you can donate monthly, and in return you will get rewards ranging from early interview viewings, bonus clips, credited as a producer, and much more. Thank you and enjoy. Yeah, you flew also the F-102 and F-106. Can you tell us about this, and also what are the differences between the two, and share some stories with us? That'd be great.
Okay, the F-102 actually had the same engine as the F-100.
Okay.
It's one of the reasons in the F-100, because I already had single seat experience and had the same engine. But the F-102 was a much better plane than the F-100. Much better. The F-100 had a very long intake, and it was very susceptible to compressor stalls.
Right.
If you got airflow wrong in your intake, it would compressor stall and throw fire out the front of the engine.
Ow,
so
right.
It would really compressor stall. And it was the same engine. So the compressor stalls didn't damage anything, but they sure didn't help anything. So the F-102, and this is the F-106, but it's much like the F-102.
Yeah.
Now, the intakes are behind it, far back, and they're very short intakes.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of a big, long intake with all this distance to travel for the air, they had a much shorter intake. And the F-102 seldom compressor stalled. Right. It was the same engine, but much better. The F-102 being a delta wing, just like this F-106, I had a very light wing loading. Mm-hmm. It only had something like 44 pounds per square foot wing loading. Mm-hmm. Much higher than the F-100, which I believe was something like 72 pounds.
Right, yeah.
So the F-102, we were never trained in aerial combat in the F-102. Mm-hmm. We were later in the F-106. But we didn't know how good we were in the F-102, but we had some impromptu dogfights with F-100s, and everyone said, yeah, we can outturn the F-100. Mm-hmm. We had a much lighter wing loading. Mm-hmm. And we also had radar, which the F-100 didn't. Mm-hmm. And we had a better layout of instruments, and we had missiles. The F-102 was a much better plane, but we talk about that later.
Did it feel similar to the F-100 when you kicked in the afterburner and stuff like that? Or, what was the feel to it?
Well, you started the F-102, it was smooth, and you were starting it. We usually had a compressed air start. But if you started the F-100 with the external power, it would wind up slowly. And if you were just a little bit, you're in the chocks and you want to move forward. So you move forward with the throttle, not too fast now, because it would shake as a little chug. They would call it chugging, as it was trying to accelerate. So it wouldn't accelerate fast. The F-102 would accelerate nicely. Mm-hmm. So the F-102 carried on. We went out there, and it seemed to have more power. Mm-hmm. But, of course, we weren't ever carrying bombs. Mm-hmm. The F-100, we always loaded it up with bombs, and with the heavy wing loading, it had a long takeoff roll. And when we landed, the F-102, like the F-106, lands in a nose-high attitude. So we had good aerodynamic drag. So we would hold the nose off the ground for a long time and get a lot of drag, during which time you could deploy the drag chute. The F-100 had no such thing. You landed this one pretty level and deployed your drag chute. And there's not much going to stop you except that drag chute and brakes.
Right.
And we call it the world's fastest tricycle. It would be hard to stop that darn thing. We did have underneath it, even got that in this little model. There's a hook, and people could take the barrier if they needed to. But no, the F-102 could outmaneuver the F-100. It had radar that the F-100, but it did not carry bombs, and it did not have a gun. So it was basically useless in Vietnam. And that's why nowadays all our fighters can carry bombs. The real mission, we all talk about air to air, but what they really want you to do is help the troops.
Of course, yeah.
So bombing is really the thing. It's nice to be able to take care of yourself in the air, but most of your targets are going to be on the ground.
Of course, yeah.
And that's why the F-100, with those 420 millimeter cannons and high drags, napalm, it was a great plane.
Absolutely. And let's move on to the F-106. Was the F-106 just an improvement on the F-102? And what improvements did it have from that aircraft, if you can tell us about that?
Well, the F-102 mission that really brought the F-106 to Alaska was a incident where just after I had got into Alaska in 1963, we had a big exercise, and we downloaded our weapons, and we had this big thing. We were flying against SAC bombers and all this stuff. So we downloaded our weapons, and we flew all day. And came evening, they said the exercise is off. Everybody go home.
Right.
And so we went home. I got out of my flight suit and into the bathtub when the telephone rang. My wife said, "It's a squadron. They want you down there immediately."
Wow.
Not quickly, immediately.
Immediately.
So I, out of the bathtub, back into my flight suit, on down to the squadron as fast as I could drive. And they met me as I came in, and they said, "Russian bombers over Alaska."
Wow.
I grabbed my parachute and helmet and ran out, and they had me an airplane number. So I ran out, got to my airplane, and ran out and opened the missile bay. No missiles.
Oh, no.
So, oh my golly. So I could see the weapons convoy. There's a little tow truck with all these missiles behind it and a big chain. And they're coming, they think it's still the exercise. And they're coming along, according to regulations, you only go no more than 15 miles an hour, and they're coming down the line. And I'm running out there and jumping up and down, waving my hands and saying all this stuff. So they finally came up, and when they got close, I ran down. I said, "Load those damn missiles. There's Russian bombers over Alaska." "Oh, okay." So they just, hell with a checklist. They know how to load missiles. So they slammed the missiles on. Anyway, so I was off. But I was late to this game, obviously, because of my many delays. So what had happened was two Russian Tu-95 Bear bombers had come in from the west of Alaska and had penetrated about 200 miles into Alaska.
Ah, right.
This is night now. This is at night. We had only a few planes with missiles. And they were taken off from King Salmon, which was far south, and Eielson up north.
Mm-hmm.
And by error of our defense controllers, they assumed, for logical reasons, that the bombers were going to continue toward Anchorage.
Right.
So we and aimed our planes in front of them. It's a logical error, but an error. Because suddenly one of the Russian planes said something to the other Russian plane, and they both turned around hard, as they were, and raced to the west.
Right.
And I have a lot of respect for the Bear. That turboprop, counter-rotating turboprops, is a very good and very fast design.
Apparently it's quite loud as well for air crews intercepting it.
They say it's the loudest airplane in the world.
Yeah.
Because as it pushes up that power, the propellers go supersonic.
Yeah.
And create an ongoing sonic boom that must be exciting. I can't believe in the crew but that. But they were going west as fast as they could now. And our planes were now behind them. And suddenly they're all going west, we're following them, but the F-102 wasn't fast enough.
Right.
And this is the time that got the F-106 up. You were asking about the differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The F-106 could have got them, but the F-102 couldn't catch them.
Mm.
We were catching them. I say we, I mean the other guys. I was far behind. Be honest, I was about 15 minutes behind the picture. So they're going west, and the Russian pilots were calling on their radio channel for help.
Right.
They knew deep help, deep hurt. So there were Russian fighters coming out of Providencia.
Mm-hmm.
And they, mostly Providencia, also Anadyr. And in the border between Alaska and Russia, the international date line is the de facto border.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be technically, but for all practical purposes, the international date line is the border. Well, the Russian bombers are going west, and we're catching up with them, and the Russian fighters are coming east, and everybody turns out their lights. Right. There wasn't a light up there. And the radar scopes showed lots of planes.
Right,
and,
yeah.
So who was us? And we had planes coming from Eielson and King Salmon, and now even from Galena. And we were coming in from Elmendorf, and we had a bunch of planes, and we crossed. The Russians suddenly were to the east of us, and we were to the west of the Russians. And nobody knows. And about this time on the radio, it says, "Come home, come home." So we were afraid of running into these guys in the dark.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their lights off, and there's a lot of planes around there, and we went home. So that was the time showing the F-102 couldn't do the job.
Yeah.
In that critical. Now the F-106, we call it the sports model because they said that the airspeed was connected to the throttle. You push the throttle forward, and the plane went faster, and it went really fast. Instead of the F-102 that barely went supersonic, and in that day we didn't get supersonic, and the F-106 could go Mach 2 with tanks.
Wow.
With tanks.
Really?
Right. We had the same wing, but we weighed more.
Wow,
So,
okay.
and I had dogfights between the F-102 and the F-106, and because it had a lighter wing loading, the F-102 could outturn the F-106. Not many planes could outturn the F-106 because of its light wing loading. Also, because of its light wing loading, it would travel high.
Yeah.
I called it King of the High Altitude Skies.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah.
We could fly at our altitudes and the old guy, like the F-4s. The F-106 loved to fly at 43,000 feet. F-4 liked to fly at 35,000 feet.
Right.
Or lower. And most of the fighting in Vietnam was done far lower than that.
Yeah, yeah.
At high altitude, the F-106 could outperform anything.
Yeah.
But let me tell you a war story putting the F-106. Very close to being a war story. And we never did get to shoot, but this one came close.
Mm-hmm.
I checked out, went from the F-102 to the F-106.
Yeah.
And after a while, the Vietnam War was heating up.
Yeah.
And they were having trouble with MiGs. And the Air Force Academy did some research, and they found out that the F-106 on paper was most like the MiG-21.
Right.
In fact, we didn't know it, but there was already a program called Have Donut.
Okay.
They had MiGs in Nevada.
Yeah.
At Area 51.
Mm-hmm.
And they put them against many of our planes. They did put them for about 3 or 4 missions against the F-106, but they were mostly test missions, completely canned, where the F-106 and the MiG-21 would fly together, and they would both light their afterburners at the same time and start not a maximum turn, but a hard turn. And the F-106 would maintain its speed as it turned, but the MiG-21 would lose speed in the turn.
Okay.
So that we could outturn them maintaining our speed. We had a lot more power and a nice light wing loading. And we had radar that they didn't have. But going back to, so they started this training. And for the first time, I got aerial combat training and learned how to maneuver as a fighter instead of an interceptor. And then they sent us in 1969, early 1969, the North Koreans first captured our boat, the USS Pueblo. It was a recon boat, Navy, and actually seized it on the high seas and took it to North Korea. Couldn't do much about that, and then we were sending reconnaissance planes, RC-121s or EC-121s, 4-motor propeller jobs, slow, low, and they would patrol off the coast of North Korea and record all the electronic emissions from North Korea, finding out where their radar stations were and all that. On Kim Il-sung's birthday, 2 MiG-21s came out from Wonsan, went straight to our RC-121 and shot it down.
Wow.
It killed 11 Americans. I don't know, I think it was more than that. I think it was something like 20 Americans were on board because it included all the people manning all these recon things. President Nixon had a choice of either going to war or stopping these flights, or the third choice was give them a fighter escort.
Mm-hmm.
So they said the F-106 was the right thing for that because the F-106 has much more range than the F-4 too.
Yeah.
So they sent us to Osan, on just south of Seoul on the west coast of Korea. We were sent out, 4 of us, we had 4 planes defending, and we went out to a tanker and got our fuel, air refueling. We had a air refueling receptacle on the top of the F-106. Mm-hmm. So we could air refuel. And then full of fuel, we went up north about 100 miles from Wonsan and cruised up and down. And we, of course, love to fly at 43,000 feet. And we usually flew at also 0.93 Mach.
Wow.
So we flew normally, that was slow cruise.
Slow cruise.
We could push it up if we really got in trouble to 0.95, 0.97 Mach. Wow. In normal military power.
So no burners.
And at those altitudes, we were way up high. Mm-hmm. And so we went out there and were doing a patrol, and somewhere down there, we couldn't see them, was our RC-121. The papers say it was an EC-121. I don't know. The RCs were Air Force and the ECs were Navy.
Right.
So I don't know, but they were the same basic plane.
Yeah.
They were encircling out there gathering information. And then after a while, we began to run low on fuel. So we turned south to the tanker to get more fuel. Mm-hmm. And we flew back into the South Korean airspace, and were refueling. We got a call on the radio. MiG's taking off from Wonsan. We're getting our fuel. I'm getting my fuel. And we're doing this. We're pretty professional at that. We're getting fuel. I get my fuel. I'm number 3 in this thing. 3 ship. 3 ship is this guy over here. So that I had a wingman, and there was the lead and his wingman. So I'm getting my fuel. I got it. I move off to the side, and number 4 goes in to get his fuel. And they said, MiG's orbiting Wonsan.
Right.
Orbiting Wonsan. Okay, they can orbit Wonsan. Then MiG's turning out to sea toward the recon aircraft. Okay. Number 4 said, 4's off. He had his fuel. Mm-hmm. They had completely screwed up their timing.
Right.
Instead of catching us when we were low on fuel or going down south to the tanker, now we're full of fuel, ready to fight.
Ready to go.
Just completely wrong time. And so we all turned north and heading to cut off the MiGs. And we accelerated to attack speed. And this is about 0.97 because we could, most of those they can't intercept us unless they're supersonic.
Yeah.
And supersonic, MiG-17s didn't do supersonic.
Yeah.
They had a lot of 17s and 19s. They weren't supersonic. MiG-21s, yes, but I don't know how many of those they had. But none of them had any radar.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
None of them had any radar. And we were coming in now on the MiGs. And our leader asked, how many? 20.
Bloody hell.
20 of them. And we've got 4. So I'm thinking, okay, no, the tactics don't cover this.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I had my own attack. Because I had both radar and infrared missiles and good radar, I'm going to go at them head on, lock on with my radar, and fire my 2 radar missiles. Then I'm going to go straight through them, going supersonic. Pop it in the burner and go supersonic. Now, I'm going to get one MiG going this way. Now, if they try to turn around, I'm going supersonic in that direction. There's no way they're going to
catch you. Yeah, of course.
No way they're going to catch me. And I assume that there's a whole bunch of them out there. Then I'm going to get out there 20 miles or so. And then I'm going to turn around and come back with radar again. They don't have radar.
Exactly.
I'm going to try to, I expect there'll be a bunch of MiGs out there and a big fur ball looking for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to pick up a MiG that seems to be going away from me.
Yeah.
Because now I have infrared missiles. But I'm going to lock onto him, and I'm going to accelerate to well supersonic and come in and fire. He won't even see me coming.
Mm-hmm.
And any of the looking at them, by the time they see me with their naked eye, it's too late to do anything.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
With guns or anything else, they're out of it. So I'm going to come in behind this guy and blast another MiG out of the sky. Yeah. Now I'm out of missiles. I'm going home and have a drink at the bar. 2 MiGs in a day is good enough. Exactly. So, but in the event, as we closed in on them, suddenly they turned around and went home.
Mm.
They chickened out.
Because they knew the threat. Yeah, yeah.
They could, we called their bluff.
Yeah.
They weren't ready to fight. And we were. I tell you, we were ready to fight. And I was going to get and go home. Now,
hell, what a great story. So this is from Jin Zhang. What was the most memorable DACT or BFM engagements in the 102 or 106 against an F4?
I was returning from one of these missions with my wingman, and we had some extra fuel, and I was going back to Osan in Korea. And we had got down to fairly low altitude, and I dropped behind him to check out my radar. He was my target, and he's flying up there, and suddenly he picked up a bogey. Nice. And on his radar, and because I have a general thing that the wingman has a contact, he's got the bounce. He knows more than I do about it. He's got the bounce. So I said, get him. And so he turned and I dropped in behind him. And very shortly, we came up upon an F4 that was also going back to Osan. Right. I don't know what he'd been doing, but he was not paying much attention. And I think the backseater was writing something down. And we pulled in my leader. He was my leader now because he'd gone forward. He pushed in and went underneath the F4 and came out about over here. And the F4, not looking around.
Right.
And over here. So I said, well, the sun was over here. So I moved my plane over so my shadow fell on his cockpit.
Right.
And when the shadow came on his cockpit, he looked up at me. And he started to go toward me. And then he saw my wingman, who was now out in front. So he turned toward my wingman, and everybody's in the afterburner. And so I dropped in behind. Okay. And afterburners, and this is at fairly low altitude, and not very low, 15,000 feet or something like that. And a big, hard turn. And I got right in, I got in behind him because he's got my wingman's up front, the F4, and I'm coming in behind. So I'm using my infrared and I'm checking my infrared system. I had missiles on board too, but now I'm checking out my infrared lock on this guy and flying around and looking at his afterburners. And I couldn't see my wingman. So I said, "Where are you?" And he says, "I'm behind you." So already flipped around behind me. So about this time, the F4 was going to try to use power. So he yanked this thing in vertical. And I yanked it into vertical too. And I stayed right behind him, playing with my infrared. And he came over the top, and I'm down with him. And he rolled out. I think he was low on fuel at that point. And he rolled out for home and came out of burner. And I came on one side of him, and my wingman joined on the other wing. And we flew together to the to where he pitched out to land at Osan. So that proved that the F-106 could outturn the F-4 in a realistic engagement. I don't think he had missiles on board. I couldn't see them particularly. So that might have been, but he did have tanks.
Yeah.
So he had tanks, but that was basically without missiles. But we had missiles, and we were able to outturn them. So it showed we could. So that's your answer. We could outturn the F-4, and we also, from the previous story I told of going home fast, we were faster than they were with a full load of munitions.
Awesome answer. So this is from Alexander Vatter here, Bruce. When, if ever, was Hughes' MA-1 fire control system of the 102, 106 up to the task? The
F-102 actually used the MG-10 system. The F-106 used the MA-1 system. So I will talk about the MA-1 system, which was more advanced. It was the MA-1 system weighed over 1,500 pounds.
Wow.
It was computers. It was heavily computed. And we had a large navigation screen that was called a Tactical Situation Display, TSD, between our legs. People think it's a radar scope. No, it was a navigation screen. But on that, we would then go into data link. And data link would give us the target information, which would go into our computer system. And it would appear on the scope below us and on the instruments. So we had information on it. So to prove that the system proved its ability was one exercise. Again, this was in Michigan, a state of Michigan, fly out of Detroit area. And we had an exercise. And at that time, the Sage automatic, semi-automatic ground equipment environment system was new and relied on vacuum tubes, a lot of them, and was known for being unstable.
Right.
But I got scrambled out on this exercise and climbed altitude and was paired on a target. They said, okay, you're after this target. And you don't say anything, but it appeared on my scope, all its information, its heading, altitude, airspeed, everything.
Wow.
And I'm flying along, still following their guidance. And suddenly they said, the Sage system has just failed. Break off the attack. I said, a negative. I have a Judy. And Judy means I'm taking over the intercept. I don't need your help anymore. I had got a load of data on the target. He was down low and coming across the northern part of Michigan. I could see his track on my TSD. So I dove down low to about, it would keep estimating where he would be based on the latest information.
Okay.
So it's constantly giving me an updated position on where he should be.
Right.
And I came down with my radar and picked him up as to where he was. And I got the kill and called in MA, mission accomplished. And turned back in, and in the debriefing, they were saying that that was the one that won us success in that operational readiness inspection, because they had to get so many kills. And when the Sage system went down, they thought they had failed. But because of the MA1 system, I was able to kill the target, and we passed the ORI.
Wow, yeah.
But that's how it worked.
Yeah, well, I'll wrap up with, you've got a book out, it's called The Spirit of Attack, Fighter Pilot Stories. Can you tell us about this and where we can get it?
Yes, I have the book, The Spirit of Attack, and it's available on Amazon.com. People can write me directly. It costs about $32 on Amazon with shipping, plus shipping.
Right.
People in the USA, I'll sell it for $20 and include shipping.
Right.
So there's a flat $20 in the USA. But your problem is your people outside the US, the mailing cost is more than the cost of the book.
yeah.
So I really can't recommend it there. I say go to my Facebook page. It's also on YouTube, but I like Facebook better. I have Facebook Spirit of Attack. And I keep modern stuff. I like to keep up with the F-35 and things like that. But go to, at the bottom, videos. Go to videos. And I have more than 20 videos there.
Wow.
That I have made of even war stories that I heard from pilots that had never been published.
Okay, right.
And I wrote them down with their approval in most cases, but in some cases they were dead, so I didn't get their approval. And I have stories from all the way back from World War I, when I was honored to be a guest of Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, America's ace of World War One. And I have a story that I heard Eddie Rickenbacker tell.
Mm-hmm.
Then I have one from the Korean War from one of my friends who shot down a MiG, and then he got shot down himself. So not too many people talk about getting shot down himself. So that one. And then I went on, of course, into Vietnam. Many of these stories I've already told you. And then I also covered the World War II with a raid of P-38s on Ploesti because my squadron had P-38s at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard from them at our reunions about this battle against Romanian IAR-80s.
Wow. Okay.
So I've got plenty of stories, but they're also on not only in my book, but also in videos.
Mm-hmm.
So I suggest if you're not in the U.S. and can't pay a horrendous amount for mailing, I suggest you look at my Spirit of Attack on Facebook.
Awesome. And do you post daily or weekly? Like, are you quite active on the Facebook scene?
I'm fairly active. I go into many things. I'm very involved in the F-35.
Mm-hmm.
I post on the F-35 channels. I also am in touch with Indians in India, with the Indian fighter pilots,
mm-hmm.
and I have enjoyed their things. I read them with great interest. They have more information on China than I've got, so I'm always interested there, but I make inputs when suitable. So I am active. I don't do it on a specific schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I post things that I think are very interesting. I love electronic warfare. I am heavily, and I used to teach electronic warfare.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, just for your people, I've been around so long. I'm 85 years old.
Yeah.
And as I started out at Pearl Harbor with my interest in flying, now I'm still interested in flying, and I can do computers too.
Exactly, which is shows today. But yeah, Bruce, what an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's been brilliant, and obviously I want to get you back on the show again because you've obviously got some fantastic stories. But thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much, Mike.